The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Windsor Castle as Camilla, Queen Consort of England, made her way through the East Terrace. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the ancient stone pathway, each step carrying the weight of decades spent navigating the complex world of British royalty. Today was different, though. Today, she carried something that meant more to her than any crown or title ever could. Nestled carefully in a velvet-lined jewelry box was her grandmother's sapphire brooch, a piece that had survived 2 world wars, countless family celebrations, and the quiet moments that truly mattered. The brooch wasn't the most expensive item in the royal collection, nor was it the most historically significant. But, for Camilla, it represented something irreplaceable, the last tangible connection to the woman who had raised her with unconditional love when her own parents were too busy with their social obligations. The morning had started peacefully enough. Camilla had planned to wear the brooch to the upcoming state dinner, where Princess Anne would be presenting awards to distinguished military personnel. It was a tradition Camilla had maintained for years, wearing something personal and meaningful during official functions, a small way to honor her family's memory while fulfilling her royal duties. As she approached the private entrance to the royal quarters, Camilla noticed the unusually heavy security presence. Guards stood at attention every few feet, their red uniforms pristine and their expressions stoic. This wasn't entirely unusual, security was always tight at Windsor, but something felt different today. There was a tension in the air that made her pause. "Good morning, Your Majesty," came a crisp voice from behind her. Camilla turned to see Captain James Hartwell, a guard she recognized but had never spoken with directly. He was young, perhaps in his early 30s, with the kind of rigid posture that spoke of years of military training. His eyes were focused and serious, but there was something else there, a nervousness that seemed out of place for someone in his position. "Good morning, Captain," Camilla replied, offering a warm smile. She had always made it a point to acknowledge the staff, understanding that kindness could bridge the often overwhelming gap between royalty and those who served them. "How are you today?" "Very well, thank you, Your Majesty," Hartwell responded, though his voice carried a slight tremor. "I'm afraid I need to speak with you about a security matter." Camilla's eyebrows rose slightly. Security matters were typically handled by her personal protection officers or senior palace officials. It was unusual for a guard of Hartwell's rank to approach her directly. "Of course. What can I help you with?" Hartwell glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "Your Majesty, I've received instructions regarding the jewelry you're carrying. There have been concerns raised about certain items that haven't been properly catalogued for tonight's state dinner." The words hit Camilla like a cold wave. She instinctively clutched the jewelry box closer to her chest, her mind racing to understand what was happening. "I'm sorry, Captain, but I'm not sure I understand." "This is my personal jewelry." "Yes, Your Majesty, I understand that," Hartwell continued, his discomfort growing more apparent with each word. "However, Princess Anne's office has requested that all jewelry worn during tonight's ceremony be verified through the official Royal Collection Registry. It's a new security protocol." Camilla felt her heart skip a beat. Princess Anne had always been particular about protocol, but this seemed excessive even for her. The sapphire brooch had never been part of the official royal collection, it was her own family heirloom, something she had owned long before marrying into the royal family. "Captain, I appreciate your diligence, but this brooch belonged to my grandmother. It's not part of the royal collection and never has been," Camilla explained, her voice remaining calm despite the growing unease in her chest. Hartwell's face reddened slightly. "Your Majesty, I understand this may be awkward, but my orders are quite clear. Any jewelry that cannot be verified through official channels must be secured until after tonight's event. It's nothing personal, it's purely a matter of protocol." The word protocol hung in the air between them like a challenge. Camilla had spent years learning to navigate royal protocol, understanding when to bend and when to stand firm. But this felt different. This felt personal. "May I ask who specifically gave you these orders?" Camilla inquired, her tone still polite but carrying an edge that hadn't been there moments before. Hartwell shifted uncomfortably. "The instructions came directly from Princess Anne's private secretary, Your Majesty. I'm told it's part of enhanced security measures for tonight's ceremony."
Camilla's mind worked quickly.
Princess Anne's relationship with her had always been complex. While they maintained a cordial public front, there had always been an underlying tension, a sense that Anne viewed Camilla as an outsider who had somehow inserted herself into a family where she didn't truly belong.
"I see," Camilla said carefully. "And what exactly are you proposing, Captain?" "I'm afraid I'll need to take the jewelry box for verification, Your Majesty."
"It will be returned to you once it's been properly documented and approved," Hartwell explained, extending his hand with obvious reluctance.
The request felt like a physical blow.
Camilla looked down at the small velvet box in her hands, thinking of her grandmother's weathered fingers fastening the same brooch to her dress before Sunday church services. She remembered being 7 years old, standing on her tiptoes to get a better look at the beautiful blue stone that seemed to capture sunlight and hold it captive.
"Captain Hartwell," Camilla began, her voice taking on the measured tone she used in difficult diplomatic situations, "I understand you're following orders, but I need you to understand something as well. This brooch isn't just jewelry to me. It's the last thing I have of my grandmother, and I've never been separated from it during an important royal function." The young guard's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Your Majesty, I truly sympathize with your situation, but I have my orders. If you'd like to speak with Princess Anne's office directly, I can arrange that, but for now, I need to secure the item." Camilla felt a flash of anger, not at the guard, who was clearly caught in an impossible situation, but at the system that could reduce something so precious to a mere security concern. She thought about her grandmother, who had faced far greater challenges with dignity, and Grace, who had taught her that sometimes the most important battles were fought quietly, with words rather than weapons. "Very well, Captain," Camilla said finally, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "But I want you to understand that you're not just taking a piece of jewelry. You're taking away something that connects me to the woman who shaped who I am today." As she handed over the velvet box, their eyes met for a moment. Hartwell looked as though he wanted to say something, an apology, perhaps, or an expression of understanding, but his training held him back. He simply nodded and tucked the box carefully into his jacket pocket. "Thank you for your cooperation, Your Majesty. The item will be kept secure, and I'll ensure you're updated on its status throughout the day." Camilla watched as the guard turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner with her most treasured possession. She stood alone in the garden, feeling more isolated than she had in years. The morning sun that had seemed so warm moments before now felt harsh and unforgiving. As she continued toward the castle entrance, Camilla's mind raced with questions and emotions. Was this really about security, or was it something more personal? Had Princess Anne orchestrated this as a way to remind her of her place in the royal hierarchy? The timing seemed too convenient, too targeted to be mere coincidence. The hours that followed were a blur of preparations and meetings, but Camilla's thoughts kept returning to that small velvet box and the young guard who had taken it from her. She found herself wondering about Captain Hartwell. What had he thought of the situation? Did he understand the significance of what he had done, or was he simply following orders without considering the human cost? By afternoon, Camilla had received no word about the brooch. Her inquiries to Princess Anne's office were met with polite but unhelpful responses about ongoing verification processes and necessary security measures. The vague answers only fueled her growing frustration and suspicion. As evening approached and the state dinner drew near, Camilla found herself standing before her dressing room mirror, trying to choose alternative jewelry that would complement her gown. But every piece seemed wrong, lacking the personal significance that made her grandmother's brooch so special. She felt incomplete, as if a part of her identity had been stripped away. The irony wasn't lost on her. She, who had spent years proving her worthiness to be part of the royal family, was now being treated as if she couldn't be trusted with her own family heirlooms. The incident had awakened something in her, a determination to confront not just this situation but the underlying attitudes that had made it possible. As she prepared to leave for the dinner, Camilla made a decision. She would find Captain Hartwell and demand answers. More than that, she would make sure he understood exactly what his actions had cost her, not as a queen consort speaking to a subordinate, but as a granddaughter who had been forced to surrender, the last physical reminder of the woman who had loved her unconditionally. The evening air was crisp as Camilla made her way through the castle corridors, her determination growing with each step. She had been patient, understanding, and diplomatic. Now it was time for a different approach, one that her grandmother would have approved of, one that honored both her royal position and her personal dignity. The confrontation that was coming would test everything she had learned about power, respect, and standing up for what mattered most. But, as she walked toward what would become one of the most emotionally charged moments of her royal career, Camilla felt her grandmother's presence with her, guiding her toward a conversation that would change how she viewed both her role in the royal family and her own strength as a woman who had never forgotten where she came from. The Great Hall was alive with activity as staff members rushed to complete final preparations for the evening's state dinner. Crystal glasses caught the light from enormous chandeliers, and the long dining tables were set with precision that would have impressed a military commander. But Camilla barely noticed the elegant surroundings as she moved through the corridors with purposeful determination. She had spent the last hour making discreet inquiries about Captain Hartwell's whereabouts, learning that he was stationed near the East Wing security checkpoint. As she approached the area, her heart pounded with a mixture of anger and nervous energy. This wasn't how she had imagined spending the hours before such an important royal function, but something deep inside her refused to let this injustice go unchallenged. The East Wing was quieter than the main areas of the castle, with only the soft footsteps of guards making their rounds. Camilla rounded the corner and spotted Captain Hartwell standing at his post, his back straight and his attention focused on monitoring the corridor. For a moment, she observed him from a distance, noting how young he looked despite his military bearing. "Captain Hartwell," she called out, her voice carrying the authority of her position while maintaining the politeness that was expected of her. The guard turned quickly, his eyes widening with surprise at seeing her in this part of the castle. "Your Majesty," he said, snapping to attention and offering a precise salute. "How may I assist you?" Camilla approached slowly, giving herself time to choose her words carefully. She had learned over the years that confrontations within royal walls required a delicate balance, enough firmness to command respect, but not so much that they created scandal or embarrassment for those involved. "I believe you know why I'm here, Captain," she began, stopping a few feet away from him. "It's been several hours since you confiscated my grandmother's brooch, and I've received no word about its status or when it might be returned to me." Hartwell's composure flickered slightly. "Your Majesty, I understand your concern. I've been checking on the verification process regularly, but these things take time. Princess Anne's office is being very thorough." "Thorough," Camilla repeated, the word carrying a weight that made the young guard shift uncomfortably. "Captain, may I ask you a personal question?" The request seemed to catch him off guard. "Of course, Your Majesty. Do you have anything from your family that holds special meaning to you? Perhaps something from a grandparent or a parent who is no longer with you?" Hartwell hesitated, clearly not expecting such a personal turn in the conversation. Yes, Your Majesty. My grandfather's watch. He served in the Royal Navy, and it's the only thing I have left of him." Camilla nodded slowly. "And how would you feel if someone told you that watch needed to be confiscated for verification during an important moment in your life? If you were told that something so personal and meaningful to you couldn't be trusted in your own hands?" The question hung in the air between them, and Camilla could see the understanding dawning in the young man's eyes. His military training had taught him to follow orders without question, but his human heart was beginning to grasp the emotional impact of his actions. "Your Majesty, He began, but faltered, clearly struggling between his duty and his growing awareness of what he had done. "Let me tell you about my grandmother, Captain," Camilla continued, her voice taking on a softer tone that somehow made her words more powerful. "She was born in 1922, the daughter of a rural doctor who believed that education and kindness were the most valuable things you could give a child. She lived through the Blitz, watching her neighborhood burn while refusing to abandon her elderly neighbors who couldn't make it to the shelters." Hartwell listened intently, his professional stoicism beginning to crack as he realized this wasn't just about protocol anymore. "She married my grandfather when she was 19, and he gave her that sapphire brooch as a wedding gift. It wasn't expensive, he was just a young accountant then, but it represented their hope for the future, their belief that love could triumph over the uncertainty of wartime." Camilla paused, gathering her thoughts and emotions before continuing. The memories were flooding back now,
triggered by the stress of the situation and the need to make this young man understand what he had taken from her. When I was 7 years old, my parents went through a very public and very messy divorce. The newspapers were full of stories about our family, and I felt like everyone was watching me, judging me, waiting to see how I would handle the scandal. My grandmother took me in during that time, and every Sunday, she would pin that brooch to her dress before we went to church together. The guard's eyes showed genuine emotion now, and Camilla could see that her words were having the impact she had hoped for. She would tell me that the sapphire was like the ocean, deep and mysterious, but constant and reliable. She said that no matter what storms came, there would always be something beautiful and enduring to hold on to. That brooch became a symbol of stability for me, a reminder that some things in life are worth protecting and cherishing. Hartwell cleared his throat softly. Your Majesty, I had no idea of the personal significance. My orders were simply to secure any unverified jewelry for tonight's event. I wasn't given any context about what it might mean to the person you were taking it from. Camilla finished for him. Captain, I don't hold you personally responsible for this situation. You were following orders, as a good soldier should. But I need you to understand that you didn't just take a piece of jewelry from me today. You took away my grandmother's presence at an important royal function. The weight of her words settled over them both. Hartwell looked down at his hands, clearly struggling with the realization of what his actions had meant beyond their technical compliance with protocol. My grandmother died when I was 25, Camilla continued. I was at her bedside, holding her hand when she passed. One of the last things she said to me was to always remember who I was beneath whatever title or position I might hold. She made me promise that I would never let anyone diminish my worth or make me feel ashamed of where I came from. The emotion in Camilla's voice was unmistakable now, and she could see that the guard was genuinely moved by her story. That brooch has been with me through every major moment of my adult life. I wore it when I married Charles, when I became stepmother to William and Harry, when I took on the responsibilities of being queen consort. It's my talisman, my connection to the woman who taught me that dignity isn't about titles or wealth, it's about how you treat others and how you stand up for what you believe in. Hartwell's military training seemed to war with his human compassion as he listened. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than before. Your Majesty, what happened today, it doesn't seem right. A family heirloom should never have been treated as a security concern. I can see how much this means to you, and I wish I had been given more information about the situation before I was asked to act. Camilla studied his face, seeing genuine remorse there. Captain, may I ask you something else? In your honest opinion, do you believe this was really about security? The question put him in an impossible position. As a guard, his loyalty was supposed to be unquestioning. But, as a human being, he was beginning to see the situation from a very different perspective. Your Majesty, I think there may have been some miscommunication about the nature of the item and its significance. Perhaps the security concerns were overstated. It was as diplomatic an answer as he could give while still acknowledging what they both now understood, that this had been more about asserting authority than protecting anyone's safety. I appreciate your honesty, Captain. Now, I need to ask you for something more difficult. I need you to help me get my grandmother's brooch back. Hartwell's eyes widened. Your Majesty, I'm not sure I have the authority to. You have more authority than you realize, Camilla interrupted gently. You're the one who took it, which means you're the one who can trace its current location. You're also the one who can testify to its nature as a personal family heirloom rather than a potential security threat. The guard was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he looked up at her with a determination that hadn't been there before. Your Majesty, let me make some calls. I may not be able to resolve this immediately, but I can at least find out exactly where your brooch is and what would be required to have it returned to you. Camilla felt a surge of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Captain. That's all I'm asking, for a chance to fight for something that means everything to me. As Hartwell reached for his radio to begin making inquiries, Camilla realized that this confrontation had become something more than just a demand for the return of her property.
It had become a teaching moment, a chance to bridge the gap between royal protocol and human understanding.
The young guard's willingness to help gave her hope that not everyone in the royal system had forgotten that behind every title was a person with feelings, memories, and connections that couldn't be catalogued or verified through official channels. As she waited for him to complete his calls, Camilla thought about her grandmother again, imagining what she would have said about this situation. Probably something about the importance of standing up for yourself while still treating others with kindness and respect. The conversation with Captain Hartwell had revealed something important, that sometimes the most powerful thing a person in authority could do was to share their vulnerability, to let others see the human cost of decisions made in the name of protocol or procedure. Now came the harder part, finding out who had really orchestrated this situation and why, and determining whether the young guard's newfound understanding would be enough to help her reclaim not just her grandmother's brooch, but her rightful place as someone whose personal history and family connections deserved respect within the royal framework. The evening was far from over, and Camilla sensed that the real confrontation was still to come. Captain Hartwell's radio crackled to life as he made his first inquiry, his voice professional but carrying a new urgency that hadn't been there during their morning encounter. Camilla watched him carefully, noting how his posture had changed. He was still every inch the disciplined guard, but now there was something more personal driving his actions. "Security Central, this is Hartwell at Checkpoint 7. I need to trace the location of an item I secured this morning under Protocol 7 Alpha." He spoke into the device, using code language that Camilla didn't fully understand but that clearly carried official weight. The response came back in static-filled bursts that she couldn't quite make out, but she could see the confusion growing on Hartwell's face as he listened. After several back-and-forth exchanges, he lowered the radio and turned to her with an expression that was part bewilderment and part concern. "Your Majesty, there's been some kind of mix-up. According to Security Central, no items were logged under Protocol 7 Alpha today. In fact, they have no record of any jewelry confiscation orders being issued from Princess Anne's office." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. If there were no official orders, if no proper protocol had been followed, then what had happened this morning was even worse than she had imagined. Someone had used the royal security system to take her grandmother's brooch, but they had done it outside of any legitimate channels. "What exactly does that mean, Captain?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Hartwell looked genuinely shaken now. "Your Majesty, it means that either there was a serious breakdown in communication, or..." He paused, clearly reluctant to voice what they were both thinking. "Or someone gave you false orders," Camilla finished for him. "Someone used your respect for authority to manipulate you into taking something that belonged to me." The young guard's face reddened with a mixture of embarrassment and growing anger. "Your Majesty, if that's true, then I've been made a fool of, and, more importantly, I've wronged you based on false information." Camilla could see the wheels turning in his mind as he began to piece together the implications of what had happened. His military training had taught him to follow the chain of command without question, but it had also instilled in him a deep sense of honor and justice. Being used as a pawn in someone else's game was clearly affecting him more than the initial order had. "Captain, I need you to tell me exactly who gave you those orders this morning. Not just that they came from Princess Anne's office, but specifically who contacted you and how." Hartwell thought for a moment before responding. "It was Sir Richard Pemberton, Princess Anne's private secretary. He called me directly around 7 this morning and said there were urgent security concerns about unverified jewelry being worn to tonight's function. He specifically mentioned that you might be carrying items that needed to be secured." Sir Richard Pemberton. Camilla knew the name well, a career civil servant who had worked for Princess Anne for over 15 years. He was known for his attention to detail and his fierce loyalty to Anne, but also for his somewhat rigid interpretation of protocol and his skeptical view of anyone he perceived as an outsider to the traditional royal establishment. "Did Sir Richard provide you with any written orders or official documentation?" Camilla asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "No, Your Majesty. He said it was too urgent for paperwork, that I should act immediately to prevent any security issues. He told me that proper documentation would follow, but that timing was critical." The picture was becoming clearer now, and Camilla felt a cold anger building in her chest. This hadn't been about security at all, it had been about sending her a message, about reminding her that certain people within the royal establishment still viewed her with suspicion and resentment. "Captain, I think we both know what really happened here," she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge that made it clear she was no longer the polite, understanding royal who had first approached him. "I think you were used as a weapon against me, and I think Sir Richard knew exactly what he was doing when he gave you those false orders." Hartwell's jaw tightened. "Your Majesty, if that's true, then he's compromised my integrity and my position." A guard who can't trust his orders is no guard at all. The personal impact on the young man wasn't lost on Camilla. In trying to hurt her, whoever was behind this had also damaged the career and reputation of an innocent soldier who had simply tried to do his duty. "Captain, I'm going to ask something of you that goes beyond your normal duties. I want you to help me confront Sir Richard directly. I want you to be there when I demand an explanation for what happened today." Hartwell looked surprised by the request. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure that's proper protocol. Confrontations between royal family members and senior staff are usually handled through official channels." "Nothing about today has followed proper protocol," Camilla replied firmly. "And sometimes, when the system fails, you have to step outside it to find justice. Will you help me?" The guard was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing the potential consequences of what she was asking. Finally, he nodded with a decisiveness that reminded her he was, at heart, a soldier who understood the difference between right and wrong. "Yes, Your Majesty. I'll help you. But first, let me try to locate where your brooch actually is. If Sir Richard took it under false pretenses, he may have it in his possession, or he may have passed it along to someone else. How do you propose we find that out?" "Leave that to me, Your Majesty. I have contacts in the security department who can track movements throughout the castle. If your brooch is still in the building, we'll find it." As Hartwell made another series of radio calls, using his military connections and security clearance to trace the path of the confiscated item, Camilla found herself reflecting on the strange turn her day had taken. What had started as a simple morning walk through the gardens had become a detective story, with her as both victim and investigator. 20 minutes later, Hartwell turned back to her with information that confirmed their worst suspicions. "Your Majesty, I've traced the brooch. After I turned it over this morning, it was taken directly to Sir Richard's office. According to building records, it never went through any verification process, and it's still there now." The confirmation of what they had suspected didn't make the reality any easier to accept. Sir Richard Pemberton had orchestrated this entire situation, using his position and the respect accorded to Princess Anne's office to humiliate Camilla and assert his own power within the royal hierarchy. "Right," Camilla said, her voice carrying a new determination. "Then, it's time Sir Richard and I had a conversation about proper protocol and professional conduct." As they made their way through the castle corridors toward the administrative wing where Sir Richard's office was located, Camilla found herself thinking about all the times over the years when she had chosen to ignore slights and insults in the name of keeping peace within the royal family. She had swallowed her pride countless times, had smiled politely while enduring condescending comments and thinly veiled hostility from various members of the royal establishment. But this was different. This wasn't just about her feelings or her dignity, it was about someone using their position to steal something precious from her, something irreplaceable that connected her to the most important person in her early life. It was about someone teaching a young guard that following orders mattered more than treating people with basic human decency. The administrative wing was quieter than the main areas of the castle, filled with offices where the real work of maintaining the royal household took place. Sir Richard's office was on the second floor, behind an imposing oak door that bore a small brass nameplate announcing his position as private secretary to Her Royal Highness the Princess Anne. Camilla paused outside the door, taking a deep breath and preparing herself for what was sure to be one of the most challenging confrontations of her royal career. She had learned over the years that direct conflict within the royal family often had consequences that extended far beyond the immediate disagreement, but sometimes those consequences were worth risking for the sake of principle. "Captain," she said quietly, "I want you to understand that what's about to happen may be uncomfortable. Sir Richard is a powerful man within the royal establishment, and he's not going to appreciate being challenged." "I understand, Your Majesty."
But he used me to wrong you, and that makes this personal for me as well." Camilla nodded and knocked firmly on the door. A cultured voice from within called out, "Come in." She opened the door and stepped into the office, with Captain Hartwell close behind her. Sir Richard Pemberton looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from polite professionalism to surprise and, then, to something that might have been guilt. "Your Majesty," he said, rising quickly from his chair. "What an unexpected pleasure. How may I assist you?" The polite words couldn't disguise the wariness in his eyes as he took in the sight of the Queen Consort accompanied by a royal guard in what was clearly not a social visit. "Sir Richard," Camilla began, her voice carrying the full authority of her position, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The confrontation she had been building toward all day was finally about to begin, and, as she looked into the eyes of the man who had orchestrated this elaborate humiliation, Camilla felt her grandmother's strength flowing through her, preparing her for a battle that would determine not just whether she got her brooch back, but whether she would continue to accept being treated as a second-class member of the royal family. Sir Richard Pemberton's office fell silent except for the steady tick of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. The room itself spoke of decades of royal service, dark wood paneling, portraits of previous monarchs, and shelves lined with leather-bound volumes of protocol and procedure. But the atmosphere was charged with tension as Camilla stood facing the man who had orchestrated the morning's events. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure I understand," Sir Richard said carefully, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone who had spent years navigating delicate political situations. But Camilla could see the nervous energy behind his composed exterior, the way his hands fidgeted with the papers on his desk. "I think you understand perfectly well," Camilla replied, her voice steady and controlled. "This morning, you instructed Captain Hartwell to confiscate my grandmother's sapphire brooch under the pretense of security verification. What I'd like to know is why you felt it necessary to use deception and manipulation to steal a family heirloom from the Queen Consort." The directness of her accusation hit Sir Richard like a physical blow. He glanced quickly at Captain Hartwell, perhaps hoping to find an ally, but the guard's expression was stone-faced and unsympathetic. "Your Majesty, there seems to have been some sort of misunderstanding," Sir Richard began, but Camilla cut him off with a gesture. "No misunderstanding, Sir Richard. Captain Hartwell has confirmed that there were no official security orders, no proper documentation, and no legitimate reason for what happened this morning. You used your position and the respect accorded to Princess Anne's office to deceive a good soldier into participating in what amounts to theft." Sir Richard's face flushed red, and, for a moment, his carefully maintained composure cracked. "Your Majesty, I resent the implication that I would." "Then, explain yourself," Camilla interrupted, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Explain why my personal property was taken without proper authority. Explain why a family heirloom that has never been part of the royal collection suddenly became a security concern. Explain why you felt it was appropriate to humiliate me hours before an important state function." The older man seemed to struggle with how to respond. His years of experience had taught him to navigate royal politics with subtlety and indirection, but Camilla's direct confrontation had caught him off guard. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "there were concerns raised about the appropriateness of wearing unverified jewelry to tonight's ceremony. Given the distinguished military guests who will be present, we felt it was important to ensure that all royal accessories met proper standards." "Whose concerns, Sir Richard? Who exactly questioned the appropriateness of my grandmother's brooch?" The question hung in the air, and Camilla could see Sir Richard weighing his options. He could continue to hide behind vague references to concerns and standards, or he could admit the truth about who had really authorized this morning's events. Captain Hartwell stepped forward slightly. "Sir Richard, I'd like to know the answer to that question as well. When you called me this morning, you told me this was urgent security matter. Now I find out there was no security protocol involved, no official orders, and no legitimate justification for what I was asked to do. You made me compromise my integrity based on false information." The accusation from the guard seemed to affect Sir Richard even more than Camilla's royal displeasure. Being called out by a subordinate for deception clearly struck at his sense of professional pride. "Captain Hartwell, you were following orders as any good soldier should," Sir Richard said defensively. "The situation was more complex than you were made aware of." "Complex how?" Camilla demanded. Complex because someone in Princess Anne's circle decided that I needed to be reminded of my place? Complex because after all these years, there are still people who see me as an interloper who doesn't deserve the same respect accorded to other members of the royal family?
The accusation struck home, and Sir Richard's mask of professional courtesy finally slipped completely.
Your Majesty, you must understand that certain traditions and standards have governed this institution for centuries.
When changes occur, when new people enter established systems, there can be adjustments required.
Adjustments, Camilla repeated, her voice heavy with disbelief. You call stealing my grandmother's brooch an adjustment? You call deceiving a loyal guard and humiliating the queen consort an adjustment? Your Majesty, that was never the intention. Then, what was the intention, Sir Richard?
Because from where I'm standing, it looks very much like someone decided to use their power to hurt me personally, and they used you and Captain Hartwell as their instruments. Sir Richard was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with whether to reveal the full truth about who had authorized his actions. Finally, he seemed to make a decision.
Your Majesty, Princess Anne felt that tonight's ceremony called for a certain formality in presentation. She was concerned that personal jewelry might detract from the dignity of the occasion and the respect owed to our military guests. There it was, the truth that Camilla had suspected but hoped wasn't the case. Princess Anne had orchestrated this entire situation, using her private secretary to do her dirty work while maintaining plausible deniability. So Princess Anne decided that my grandmother's brooch wasn't appropriate for a royal function, Camilla said, her voice dangerously quiet. She decided that a piece of jewelry that has seen me through every important moment of my royal life wasn't dignified enough for her ceremony. Your Majesty, I'm sure Princess Anne meant no personal slight.
Sir Richard, Camilla interrupted, her composure finally beginning to crack. My grandmother's brooch has been with me through 20 years of royal service. It was with me when I married Charles, when I stood beside him during his mother's funeral, when I took on the responsibilities of supporting the crown through some of its most challenging periods. That brooch has more royal dignity in its setting than some people in this palace have in their entire bodies.
The raw emotion in her voice seemed to shock both men.
They had never seen this side of Camilla, the fierce protectiveness, the deep anger at being dismissed and diminished by people who had never bothered to understand what she brought to the royal family.
Your Majesty, Captain Hartwell said quietly, where is the brooch now?
Sir Richard looked defeated as he reached into his desk drawer and withdrew the familiar velvet box.
It's here. It was never intended to be kept permanently, just secured for the evening. Secured from what? Camilla demanded as she took the box from his hands, clutching it to her chest. From contaminating Princess Anne's perfectly orchestrated ceremony with something that actually meant something to someone?
She opened the box to confirm that the brooch was undamaged, and the sight of the familiar sapphire brought tears to her eyes. But these weren't tears of relief, they were tears of anger and frustration at having been put through this ordeal over something so precious and personal. Sir Richard, she said, her voice steady again but carrying a weight that made both men straighten involuntarily, I want you to understand something very clearly. This brooch represents the woman who taught me everything I know about dignity, grace, and standing up for what's right. When you took it from me this morning, you didn't just steal a piece of jewelry, you attacked the memory of the most important person in my life. Sir Richard looked genuinely stricken by her words.
Your Majesty, I never intended.
Intentions don't matter when the result is causing pain to someone who has dedicated her life to serving the crown, Camilla continued. What matters is that you allowed yourself to be used as a weapon against a member of the royal family, and you were willing to deceive and manipulate others to carry out that attack. She turned to Captain Hartwell, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing understanding of how he had been manipulated. Captain, you were used badly today, but you've also shown real character in helping me get to the truth. I want you to know that your integrity hasn't been compromised by this situation. If anything, your willingness to question what happened and help me seek answers has proven your worth as both a soldier and a human being. The young guard stood straighter.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
I'm sorry I was part of causing you pain, even unknowingly.
You have nothing to apologize for, Captain. You were doing your duty as you understood it.
But, Sir Richard. She turned back to the private secretary, who looked as if he wished he could disappear entirely. "Sir Richard, you've learned something important today about the cost of using people as pawns in palace politics. Captain Hartwell's reputation could have been destroyed by your deception. My relationship with Princess Anne has been further damaged by this pettiness. And, most importantly, you've shown that there are still people in this institution who believe that hurting others is an acceptable way to make political points." The older man seemed to age before their eyes as the full weight of what he had done settled over him. "Your Majesty, is there anything I can do to make amends for what happened today?" Camilla considered the question carefully. Part of her wanted to demand his resignation, to ensure that he faced real consequences for his actions. But another part of her, the part shaped by her grandmother's teachings about forgiveness and second chances, saw an opportunity for something more constructive. "Sir Richard, what you can do is remember this conversation the next time someone asks you to treat any member of the royal family with anything less than the respect they deserve. What you can do is ensure that Captain Hartwell faces no negative consequences for his role in helping me uncover the truth today. And, what you can do is think very carefully about whether the person you've become in service to this institution is someone you can be proud of." As she prepared to leave his office, Camilla realized that something fundamental had changed during this confrontation. She had found her voice in a way that she never had before, not the careful, diplomatic voice of a royal consort, but the strong, clear voice of a woman who refused to be diminished or dismissed. The sapphire brooch was safely back in her possession, but, more importantly, she had reclaimed something else that had been taken from her over the years, her sense of her own worth and her right to demand the respect she had earned through decades of faithful service. As she walked back through the castle corridors with Captain Hartwell beside her, Camilla felt her grandmother's presence more strongly than she had in years. The old woman would have been proud of how her granddaughter had stood up for herself, how she had turned a moment of humiliation into an opportunity to assert her dignity and demand better treatment from those around her. The state dinner was still ahead, and Camilla knew that wearing her grandmother's brooch would carry extra significance now. It would be not just a symbol of family connection, but a declaration that she belonged in this institution on her own terms, with her own history and her own sources of strength. The confrontation was over, but its effects would ripple through the royal household for years to come, changing how Camilla saw herself and how others would be forced to see her, not as an outsider to be tolerated, but as a queen consort who had earned her place through grace, strength, and an unshakable connection to the values that had shaped her long before she ever entered the royal world.